Hi, I'm Conor Byrne, and this is That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you will hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique insights. Today, I am speaking to Conor Archbold, co-founder of Tracksuit. What is Tracksuit, I hear you ask? Well, it is the beautiful, always-on and radically affordable brand tracking for modern consumer brands. Tracksuit has come into the market to help scaling brand marketers have good conversations with their C-suite on those top of funnel metrics. They've come in and created something that is affordable and more accessible, and they're disrupting the market for the better. Tracksuit is backed by none other than former guest James Hurman and Mark Ritson, not a former guest yet. Today we talk about how Tracksuit came about, the problem it is solving for, and the difference it is making. We talk about how Conor and his co-founder Matt are growing their business, how they're managing to maintain their culture and stay focused on what really matters. This isn't just an episode about brand tracking, it is about the difference it can make to a business, and it's also about how scale-up is helping scale up more scale-ups. Oh, and I also try and talk Conor into my other podcast ideas, so keep listening for that. If you need help to grow your business through marketing, get in touch and see how we can help through our range of services on that'swhaticallmarketing.com. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you are listening to get notified of when our next episode lands. Today's episode of That's What I Call Marketing is brought to you by the Indie List, Ireland's leader for freelance marketing, creative and digital talent. The Indie List provides easy access to hundreds of highly experienced and vetted experts across the marketing services business, quickly and cost effectively. You can check out their full range of services at indielist.ie. Conor, thanks a million for joining me on That's What I Call Marketing.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. My first namesake on the podcast. I'm just delighted. Conor meets Conor. That's it. The name is done.
That's it. We're done now. At least you have the proper spelling. So apologies for bringing this rubber spelling to the podcast. But
I'll have to talk to your Irish-born father about that.
Yeah. It's his fault.
Yeah. You're in New York at the moment, but you're from New Zealand. You have some Irish heritage. Tell me a bit about your background and kind of how you've ended up where you are.
How long do you have? Yes, you said Irish parents, but I was born in the States in California, and I moved to New Zealand when I was 11. So, bit of a motley crew of passports there, I guess you could say. And yeah, grew up in New Zealand, started my career there, went to university there, and I'm in New York now with Tracksuit, our company, getting the team onboarded and set up over here. And I'll be back in New Zealand in November. We're flying all the team back and we'll be there for another stint. Yeah.
Great. Well, I want to get into Tracksuit. That's really what we're here to talk about. But interestingly, like you, if I'm right, you studied to be a lawyer. So like you didn't go to university to be a marketer, am I right?
Certainly not. No.
Well, I mean, same.
No. It's almost it's the other way. I'm like so glad I'm here instead of being a lawyer. I studied law and finance, so just very grateful to be out of that sphere and into the marketing sphere. Much more exciting and interesting. Sorry to my old law boss if you're listening, which you won't be. Fine. Studied law and finance. I was a lawyer for 4 years. That was interesting. And I learned a lot, like that was very helpful. And then I wanted to get into startups as people do. But there weren't a lot of ways to do that in little old New Zealand then. So, I worked with one of our leading VCs to venture capital firms to launch our first accelerator program in Auckland. So we raised a small fund together and then brought a bunch of startups in, and that was kind of my way of like learning about the startup world without having any idea of what to do. And then I joined a marketing tech business called Mishguru, is a Snapchat third-party app, and I was the generalist. I was the ops nerd, doing all the back-end stuff, the invoicing, and it was phenomenal. We grew very quickly. We were the enterprise solution for Snapchat. Worked with people like McDonald's and Paramount Pictures, and it was a wild ride. We opened up offices in Sydney, Berlin, and New York, and that landed me over here. in New York for the first time. And, but we sort of, we followed Snapchat's trajectory. We like grew really quickly and then we flatlined for
Okay.
about 9 quarters. And that was learned a lot is the great way to talk about that. Yeah, but it was hard. And that's where I met my co-founder of Tracksuit, Matt. And so he ended up as head of APAC and I ended up as COO. And we kind of grew that business as far and as long as we could.
So you tell me a bit about Tracksuit. First of all, for people who are listening who don't know what Tracksuit is, maybe we'll start there and then we get into more detail on it.
Yeah, so Tracksuit's beautiful, affordable, always on brand tracking, meaning that we do tons of consumer surveys, 10 million first party data points collected last month. And we tell brands what people think and feel about them through conducting those surveys. It's the oldest form of market research, going around and asking people what they think and feel about brands. But we've kind of automated it and made it much more beautiful and easy to use. The idea, for Tracksuit, when I was in New York working with this other company, I became kind of fascinated. I was here for the rise of the direct to consumer, world, and watched Casper Mattress and Allbirds and Warby Parker and, all amazing businesses, cool brands. But was sort of, as an ops nerd, I was fascinated by this like ceiling that they often hit. They like grow really quickly and they have all these loyal fans, and then they stop raising money and they can't grow anymore. And so that was sort of the problem that we started with. And upon returning to New Zealand when COVID hit and my first daughter was on the way, met up with James Hurman and also the team at TRA, which is a market research company. And we just started like talking about this fascination. And I guess my like software as a service nerdiness and James's brand nerdiness and the market research company's TRA's market research nerdiness sort of combined to realize that, under the guise of what gets measured gets managed, these modern companies were not tracking top of funnel, and they weren't even aware of what their, awareness, consideration, preference might be. And therefore they had no reason to invest in it and to kind of communicate it to the board. So we thought, let's try and get the same data that, Pepsi and Coke and L'Oreal and, Unilever brands have, and get that into these boards and these C-suites. And then hopefully they will fix the way that they invest their marketing budget and, think about the long and the short of it and think about all these other, marketing science terms that we're aware of now, but that they have no idea about.
How did you how did you kind of get to that point though? Because I mean, as you say, like you look at those brands and then you're kind of having conversations with the likes of James and others who are kind of like, what was the moment where you were like, that's the problem. The problem is they're not tracking these metrics.
When James he calls himself the brand custodian of a whole bunch of like growth brands. He'll go to their board meetings and talk to them about the importance of this stuff. And so he has this experience of being in board meetings and them sort of just dumping all of the money into performance because of next quarter's targets, and him standing there saying, this is important, but not being able to get the message through. And then when you switch it and you get the data to say, hey, our awareness is 4% and our biggest competitor's awareness is like 28%. We need to do something about that. And then the board sort of goes, well, that's very interesting. Thank you for pointing that out. We would love to award you with millions of dollars of budget. And so it's purely just like getting the right metrics in and getting the discussion going in the right way. And usually focused around numbers that helps get that investment. So yeah, it comes down to that, what gets measured gets managed idea, and the fact that C-suite, CFOs, boards want to be able to point to that investment being successful or unsuccessful at the end of the day. And so they need something to measure it.
I mean, there are platforms out there that do this. Was it that it was cost prohibitive to go with some of those other platforms, naming no names?
Yeah, I mean, the big players, we don't really come up against each other that much, to be honest, because they're a perfect tool for large enterprise companies, and we're a perfect tool for growth stage companies. And as we continue to grow, I'm sure that won't always be the case, and they may launch something that's more down market focused. But for now, we're kind of playing in our own spaces, and it works really well. And I think that's one of the reasons we're growing so fast is you have all of these marketers who are classically trained. They grew up at a Pepsi or a Unilever, and then they go join cool startup, D2C startup X or consumer fintech X, and not X, the Twitter X, just
Yeah.
using that as a placeholder. Sorry. Very confusing now. But they go join those smaller companies or up and coming companies, and they miss brand tracking. And so, when we talk to those people, they just say, "Oh, this is a no brainer. Like this is the same data that I had, and it's at a price point that I can work with."
It's kind of interesting. I can definitely see how starting and scaling businesses, you need that information. You need to know, what do people know? Because otherwise it's purely anecdotal. Like the salesperson saying, everybody talks about this when we're talking to them. It's like, well, we talked to 12 people. Like maybe that is representative. Maybe it's not. Well, let's go find out.
Yeah. And we've had some success with that in New Zealand and Australia, to be perfectly honest. Like there are lots of companies who have global trackers and then don't have trackers in New Zealand and Australia. And so that's been a great way to like test our product with big teams and big players, but at a smaller scale. And now that we're launched into the US and UK, the size of company we're dealing with has changed again. Definitely moving up market. Someone like Athletic Brewing, who are amazing. One of the fastest growing private companies in America. They do non-alcoholic beer, but they're a very large company by New Zealand standards. And,
Yeah.
but they're here, they're a perfect fit for Tracksuit. And so, yeah, it's fascinating just as we're changing country, who we align with and where the need is strongest.
One of the things I read about the starting of Tracksuit was, I found this fascinating. So you had an idea, you took it to a number of companies, like quite a lot of companies. 11 of them bought the idea. You didn't actually have anything built yet. Is that true? Like you just basically sold them an idea, which is genius, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, in a non-dodgy way, you were like, "Hey, this is a survey-based product. We think we can do it," and it was like here, I think it's a validation question, really. So I believe that you can have 100 conversations, and by the end of those 100 conversations, you'll have an idea of what your positioning is and whether your idea is worth pursuing. And by the 68th conversation, you're right, 11 of them had basically committed upfront contracts. And what we said was, we're going to deliver you with awareness, consideration, preference, brand sentiment, and we'll deliver that to you every month. And maybe for the first few, it'll be a slide pack. But we're going to get started on building this thing as soon as we have 10 people committed. And so, 10 and 11 signed pretty much on the same day. So we were like, cool, let's go build it. We hired a dev and we started building. And actually within the first month, we did produce a dashboard. It was kind of a white labeled version, but we produced a dashboard based on the data we collected. And then, we had that validation, and Matt, my co-founders, just amazing at having conversations and turning them into sales. And so he closed another bunch of brands, and then we kept building and made version 2, which was better. And then, now we're sort of on version 4 after 2.5 years, and we've got around 330 clients, tracking 3,000 brands globally. And so, it's kicked on. And we're having a blast.
That's huge. That is amazing. What was it about those early conversations that you were having that was connecting with people? Because again, like you've said, you're not from the marketing world. Okay, I know James, and I don't know if he was part of those conversations. I would, fully be convinced by him if he was. If he was,
yeah.
What were those things that you were saying that people were kind of going, "Oh yeah, this is the magic that we need," I guess.
I mean, I think like Matt and I, we come from software as a service and from the technology side and more like we're like business model innovation, right?
Yeah.
And so by talking to James and the TRA team, we got all this input of what brand and market research could do and needed. And then, we sort of looked at it from more like a business model perspective. We would go talk to heads of marketing or heads of brand and say, do you have brand tracking? And they would just be like, no. And we'd be like, why? And they'd be like, well, it costs $120,000. We'd be like, do you want brand tracking? They would say, yes. And they're like, have you ever had brand tracking? Well, yeah, when I worked at XYZ. And you'd be like, okay, so you know how to use it. You want it. What would you pay for it? And they would be like, I don't know, 10, 20 grand would be great. And we were like, okay, sign this document and we will give you brand tracking for 10 to 20K.
That's incredible. And because I was wondering as well, that kind of, particularly the early part, like, was there concerns or questions around the validity of the surveys and, statistical significance and all that? Did that come up? It must have.
Definitely people would ask, but we were working with TRA. They sort of had our backs and they're a well-known name down in New Zealand and Australia. So, we didn't have those. People would ask and we'd say, well, it's essentially being built and backed by TRA. And people would say, oh, great. Well, we love them. So cool.
Yeah. So,
and then you flat, I just like I had like James Hurman's face on a little thing that I would flash in front of my own and say, it's fine. Don't worry about
it. You talked there about the C-suite and kind of the metrics not getting into the C-suite, and like I definitely see that as a huge challenge, right? And have you found that just and getting the data is enough, or has there also been a job to do to educate the C-suite? I mean, I know James has done a huge amount of that. Like, do you find that's needed then as well? It's not like we sell the solution, but we also need to help educate.
I think a big part of the success on the usability side of Tracksuit is we've like scaled back what brand tracking is. I went to a bunch of meetings where brand tracking slide packs were handed over to marketers and like senior leadership at companies. And then I would sort of hang around afterwards and I would ask them to pull out the few slides that they really cared about and the ones they would share internally to get buy-in. And almost across the board, they pulled out the same 5 slides from these 100-page slide packs. And those are the 5 tabs of the Tracksuit dashboard.
So what are those 5 tabs? Can you, or do
yeah,
I see for that?
Funnel, awareness, consideration, usage, and preference. And then you have like a profile tab, which breaks each one of those down into who the people are that are in, those who are aware of you. These are the demographics. This is the demographic breakdown. And then you have the like imagery. So an open text box question. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about brand? And then you have statements. So what do you care about brand? We want to be ethical. We're sustainably sourced. We've got good customer care. And then you put those in and people get rated on those qualities against their competitors. And then just a timeline view of all of that information over time.
Oh, gross.
In different graphs. So, and so we're collecting surveys every single week. And so the numbers are sort of moving, but it's a rolling average of the last 1,000 responses that they're getting.
That's definitely one of the things I wanted to ask you about a bit, which is like you've made it more accessible and in terms of cost, but also in an organization, if I'm right, that access is not a thing that's to the maybe privileged few, for want of a better word. But like, I've seen that before. It's like, well, yeah, no, I can't afford to give that person access. So it's open, like an organization buys Tracksuit, everyone can use it.
Yeah, there's no limit on seats. We want people to invite their agencies in, media, creative, PR, get everybody in there. Everyone should be working off the same data to understand whether what they're doing is working.
I mean, that is great because there is that, or do you know what I've often seen as well? It then became someone's job to make the data accessible. Like I've seen that, like that seems crazy. Totally. So you're spending a ton of money on limiting the access and then someone is hired to do these weekly reports. And not, that's someone, I'm not having to go at someone's job, but anyway, it seems crazy. But one of the things I have seen before is a misunderstanding of what you're seeing. Like, have you come across that? Like, people are going, well, I've looked at this today and tomorrow, and, looks like our awareness has gone through the roof, and, not people not looking at the rolling average or taking time into consideration. Have you seen that as an issue or not?
Educating people through, hey, here's a great case study. Here's how you use it. Here's the right way. So it's basically just all education through blogs and case studies and saying like, this is how you use brand tracking. But the other thing that's nice is that a lot of our customers have used brand tracking before.
Yeah.
So the internal champion who's signing up initially has used brand tracking. They're familiar with it, and then they're saying, this is how you use it. This is how you communicate with it. Those who haven't used it before, they sort of go through a slightly different onboarding process where we give them a lot more content, because when someone signs up, it takes about 3 weeks to gather statistically significant
That's true.
surveys.
That's Connor
Oh
thing.
man, every time. Just have some more water. Hold on. It takes about 3 weeks to gather statistically significant surveys. And so we have this 3 weeks in which we sort of send them like, this is what awareness means. This is what preference means. This is how the funnel works. And, now that we're tracking 3,000 brands, we also have benchmarks. Like we can say, this is how fast these categories are growing. This is what you can expect to be, looking for this year. This is an appropriate goal. And so people aren't saying, well, we're going to go from 10 to 35% awareness this year. It's like, no, your category, the average awareness growth in your category last year was 4%. So really good, would be 6, maybe. And so like, that's where we sort of sit. In this, like where it's almost a little more open source. It's like, here's all of this data, here are all the benchmarks, and everyone should be making decisions about top of funnel aligning around the same stuff.
Which is brilliant. Like, there's so much there, like, for, that managing expectations for a marketer, like, that's brilliant. So that, tick box, but also the shared language, an understanding of what these things mean. So having that time to explain to people, this is what we mean, this is what benchmarks are, is hugely, I guess it's empowering then for marketers that they're able to have proper conversations around this stuff.
Yeah. And something else that's really interesting. I mean, this is kind of slightly related, but like, I think if what brand tracking is, you go gather a bunch of data and then you present it in a dashboard or slides. And then the next job to do is to derive insights from that data. And then the next job to do is to create strategy from those insights. And so it's sort of like this 3-part process. And so far, brand tracking has basically just been the collection of data and the presentation of that data. Sometimes there are insights included, but you need someone to dive in and actually like go through everything. I think where, if you think about the evolution of brand tracking and how we can continue to add value to our customers, it's sort of like, cool, we've collected the data, that's table stakes. We've got statistical significance. What are the insights from that? And, with large language models and with AI these days, it's very easy to start surfacing insights across so many categories and so many brands. And so you can start saying, hey, this is relevant for you to pay attention to, whether it's just this age group and this demographic, things are declining and this one's increasing. What have you done in that space over the last 6 months? And then the strategy is like, do that again or stop doing that. And, going back to what we were talking about with the C-suite and board, rather than logging in and seeing a whole bunch of graphs that mean nothing to them, they can just, the first page they land on is, awareness is increasing with women between 25 and 34, and it's increased 6% over the last 3 months. And that's like, whoa, that's significant. I care about that.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
And they don't have to look at any dashboards or any data. They just get the insight. And that's the most important thing.
You are listening to That's What I Call Marketing, a partnership with the Indie List, where you will find experienced and vetted marketing talent, people like me, and also people who design and people who write. You get the idea. Check out theindielist.ie.
You are listening to That's What I Call Marketing. Do you need help growing your business through marketing? Well, check out our services at that'swhaticallmarketing.com. Get in touch today and see how we can help.
That's amazing. Kind of having, so what? Do you know what I mean? That they can ask the question of the marketing. You're like, what's happening here? Like, why? Are you able to, given, I guess, the scale of a market like the US, are you able to create like groups in different parts of the States if you want to do tests? Because that's a hugely important thing. Are you able to do that?
Right now we're very focused on, like just being the best brand tracker in the world. And that's what we're good at. And we're driving that wedge in very hard. So we sort of lean away from campaign, or any other type of measurement. So that's where we play, right now. But yeah, I think the interesting thing about brand tracking is, once a customer uses us for brand tracking, we sort of become their trusted source of data. They're logging in once a month, every couple times a quarter. They're downloading reports. Those go to the board. And very often they're coming to us with like, hey, how often do people buy these types of products? So like, I want to do some packaging testing. And so we're starting to experiment with what other products we can tack on top of brand tracking that are super valuable for our clients.
How do you keep that level of focus? Because, it must be tempting, when you are with clients and they're like, oh, how about this? And like I've just done, right? Stick this on, do this.
Totally. I mean, and I think that's I think Matt and I have both been in other companies that didn't work for a multitude of reasons, but one of the avoidable reasons, there are lots of unavoidable ones, but one of the avoidable reasons is lack of focus. And so we've come into this very intentionally saying, we're going to do this one thing. We're going to drive a wedge in really deep, really hard with this one very good product. And then we'll expand once we've feel like we've got, market saturation with that. So we say no a lot.
Right.
And
Each other?
we think, nah, I'd say we're kind of yes men to each other, but to other, we're like, no, we're good. We challenge each other. It's a very healthy relationship, to be honest. It's, we work very well together.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we do say no a lot, and, it's just, that's what's making us move a lot faster than we would otherwise.
Yeah. That's easy to say, but hard to do. I think that's very admirable.
We're trying, just one foot in front of the other over here.
And one of the things that I also find interesting is like you are a scaling business, you're growing, you're getting funding, you're adding people to your team. And so how are you approaching that, as well as you're trying to, do what you're doing, but then there's all this other stuff. I mean, you're into ops, so I'm sure you're a very organized guy.
I mean, I try. I'm a generalist, so I'm like 80% good at everything, and then hopefully hire someone who's much better than me at everything. But yeah, we are very intentional about how we scale as well. And one of the things that when we launched, we were bootstrapped for the first kind of 2 years. So first 20 months, we didn't raise any funding. We used that 110K from those first 11 clients to fund the product build. And then, we got more customers and we were able to hire a few more people. But only in January this year, we raised a seed round, and we sort of doubled in size from a revenue perspective since then. But we've also grown from, I think we were 14 then, we're now 52. So, and we've launched offices in Australia, the US, and UK. So like things are now growing much quicker than they were initially. And in that initial period, we spent a lot of time thinking about, our values and how we want to build this business. And it was fun. A funny thing that Matt and I discussed at the start was like, we were actually a little bit sick of MarTech at the time. We were like, we did MarTech, like maybe we should help the environment, or like, go into like plant-based protein, or do something that will feel like we're changing the world from a carbon footprint point of view. And then Tracksuit, this opportunity like reared its head. Like we were having those conversations with customers and they were committing, and we were like, oh my God, this is true product market fit. And I think at that time we realized actually this is what we're good at.
Right.
And this is how we can add the most value. And, there's like that learn, earn, return framework. So we've done a lot of learning in MarTech, and hopefully now we can build something that's good and helps us kind of like build a massive team. And while we're doing that, the impact we can make is actually changing the way that $1 billion businesses are built. And so, we've got we've leaned into hard things from the start. We have transparent compensation. We've made, very hard decisions to ensure that, we're always like hitting our diversity and equity goals. And we want to maintain like a really good work-life relationship while we're building this company, which is not something that a lot of billion-dollar companies manage to do. In the high growth tech space. And so, we challenge ourselves constantly on that front to say, like, is this a decision we need to make right now? Yes, we might grow a little bit faster, but is it putting any of these other goals at risk? And so we try very hard to make sure that our culture is maintained while we scale. And that's why I'm in New York right now. It's like, we could have hired people here and kind of let them go after sales and, deal with customers, but they wouldn't have understood the Tracksuit culture. And so I'm here for 3 months to make sure that we're laughing and having a good time while we're doing it.
But I mean, it's so important to get that right. You're right. I mean, it's easy to find people who will do what you need them to do, but actually doing it the way, there's the what and the how, right? Like, how they go about it is really important. And like, when you were talking about that, and kind of your, should you be going into, doing something sustainably? And I was thinking, well, like, what you're doing now is giving probably companies who might be doing that the opportunity to measure what they're doing and grow, so like the knock-on effect. And then when you're, when you're multimillionaires as well, you'll probably do great stuff. As well. So
Hey, don't jinx it. Don't jinx it. Come on, don't say it out loud.
Well, it's like,
knock on wood somewhere. Yeah. No, I think you're right. And we, now that it's reached some like level of scale and we've gotten to this point of working with, a couple hundred brands, we're realizing that, like, by helping, up and coming brands scale who are thinking about sustainability and like sourcing the right kind of products and fair pay for farmers and things like that, like, that's a better world. And so we are really grateful for that. And that makes us feel like we're making a difference.
Yeah. And do you think your position as a kind of a scaling company helps you in conversations with those companies? Cause you're in the room with people, you're like, look, we get this. And, does that help?
Yeah. And there's other things, I think our positioning, we speak to brand marketers rather than insights teams, or, we're more focused on the founder, CFO and brand marketer relationship. So that helps. And then being in the same stage, we're talking to the same investors. Like, we released a blog a few weeks ago, written by the very talented Ellie, who's our content lead, but she was able to get quotes from Lair Hippo and Red Antler, these like very prominent consumer funds and consumer agencies in New York who have seen this problem firsthand. And they're saying, like, hey, we really want to start paying attention to top of funnel, rather than just dumping money into performance and making sure that we hit next month's growth goals. It's actually, we're going to start paying attention to top of funnel. We're going to invest in awareness and we're going to manage it. And over time, we're going to build successful companies. And so, them aligning with how brands want to grow in a more sustainable way is really important. And we're in those conversations. So I think that's important.
It's so important because there's a shift. Like, there feels like there's a shift, and not that there's a move away from performance marketing, nor should there be, but like there's a more of an understanding. In fairness, I think, and I spoke to James about, his book is helping, like, just capturing current demand and creating future demand. There is that shift happening, and it's great to see, you're part of that conversation because it's only helping, right?
Yeah. And that little framing is such a good example of how, like, changing the design or changing how you communicate what marketers think is quite a simple term, but changing how you frame it with the board and C-suite from brand equity to future demand, and seeing how they jump at that. And they're like, oh, we do want future demand. Definitely. Yeah. Brand equity seems fluffy. I have no idea what that means. Future demand. Love that for us. Let's go on that journey 100%.
When you're thinking about then obviously your own demand, like, you need to capture current demand, create future demand. How are you going about that? And how are you measuring, your future and current
I mean,
demand.
we have a tracksuit checker for tracksuit, which is pretty fun. It's a small segment of the world that we're surveying. So, it's got limited statistical significance, but, yeah, cause we don't do B2B. We're purely consumer. So it's kind of a fun play in the background, but we do measure it and it is interesting. Um, and we're building, I think like we're leaning into community. Brand marketers have never really had any support, at least for the last kind of 15, 20 years. Growth marketing got really cool. It would sort of swan into the offices at 10 a.m. and just kind of like chuck a few dollars into Facebook and be like, bam, just made a bunch of money. See you later. I'm going to go have a cocktail. And then now creative is coming back into vogue. It's like creatives now are coming in. Creative effectiveness is having another moment.
Yeah.
And, we're there to support those people in proving their arguments.
I love that. You need to do a little video about how what the growth marketers did. I can see it already. Very creative, actually. And it is great to see creative coming back. Like, you see stuff and, the guys from Always Sunny in Philadelphia with their 4 pillars, and they have that ad, and like, it's just charming. It's witty. Like, and I think that's brilliant stuff and great conversations for brands to be having, and particularly growing brands. Might definitely hold us a pretty strong view that creativity can help unlock growth, without a doubt.
Totally. Yeah. And we found like agency, we're partnering with a ton of agencies, not as customers, but they're finding, so a brand will become a tracksuit customer and then they'll invite their agencies into the dashboard. And all of a sudden, whether they're media or creative or PR, all of a sudden those agencies, they're like, we look so good. Like we did this big thing and their awareness went up 3%. And now we have something to point to. I think an important thing that gets lost, especially in the growth stage, is you need to like constantly be investing in brand. It's like, take that one huge investment you have in November and split that across every month and try to just build on it every single month. Because what people were doing when they could only afford an annual dip was they would do their huge brand campaign in November. They would do a dip in December and they'd be like, our awareness went up. This is great. And then their share of mind sort of drops.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
actually for the rest of the year, they suffer. And then they do it again the next year and maybe it goes up a little bit, or it's stagnant and it's sort of fine. But if you track it all year, the agency and the brand realize that it falls off about 3 months later. And then they start investing regularly and it ends up better for everyone because the agencies get to do better work. The brands grow consistently and we're there to help them do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great point as well. And also probably helps as well with, you mentioned consistency, but consistency of work and not, doing something different every time they're doing something. Talked to a lot of people on this podcast about like the boredom in marketing is us. Like we get bored of our own work, not no one else.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. And most people don't see it. It's like,
Yeah. James, I don't know. I mean, I know you've spoken to James and he might have even used this analogy, but he often will talk about Warren Buffetting your brand investment. It's just like the same thing every single week forever. And you're just putting that into that long-term investment. And then you're day trading on your performance side. So it's like, go play around with day trading, do that every day, see if you can get a few gains, but just Warren Buffett that brand every month, same investment, same thing over and over and over again. And it works.
Yeah, it does. People don't get bored. We've talked about James Hurman a bit, and Mark Ritson is involved. Well, backed as well. So the two of them, probably a ton of others, but they're well-known, well-regarded names. How important has that been for your journey?
I mean, I think coming out of New Zealand, when everyone just thinks you're like a bunch of hobbits, it's really nice to have some credible folks who are like, this is a real thing. They're a real deal. And so, yeah, James, was able to speak at the Cannes Lions Festival. Yeah. And he was up there representing Tracksuit and that was awesome. And Mark Ritson, he's very good at not like placing us above others. He uses our competitors. He uses us. He's very fair in that way. But, being on his radar is super important. So he's been amazing. And just like having a mention by Mark Ritson, like our website hits go up.
I can imagine.
Like 50-fold per day, you know? And so it's just phenomenal. And so, yeah, they put us on the map initially and gave us that credibility that we needed to not be a bunch of hobbits.
But to really obviously clearly clued in, switched on people who aren't going to do that if this is like a pile of shit.
Yeah. Well, when we first spoke to Mark, first of all, that was great validation for us because that was still very early in our journey. And to hear someone like that kind of say, yep, good job, meant a lot. And it meant that we had some, a couple extra long nights in the tank in those early days. And then, yeah, he's helped us just by mentioning and sharing.
And yeah, I'm sure great just knowledge as well to have around. What then kind of are the plans? You mentioned the markets you're in, so New Zealand, Australia, UK, and now the States. That's core focus. Without giving away the 3 to 5 year business plan, what's the 3 to 5 year business plan?
I think we'll for now, 5 years is a long time in startup land. Like that's a big question. I don't know. But like, I think for the next 12 months, we are focused on scaling the US and UK in the same way that we have New Zealand and Australia. Like we're treating them like brand new startups. So we've got our first kind of 30 to 50 customers in each region. We're leaning in, building a small team who will service those customers, like over service those customers,
Right.
make sure they're getting value, and understanding whether our product market fit is the same, because, there's always a question there of like, is the same value being generated for these clients, and are they loving Tracksuit as much? And obviously it helps to be driving around and delivering them tracksuits monogrammed with their initials, and
They're so cool. Like I love when I see like somebody new joins your team and they're in the tracksuit. I was like, they're deadly. Like they're so... Was that why you called it tracksuit? Just so you could
I mean,
the track?
it definitely, it was like on the radar. Like we were like, this will be fun. Like if we call it Tracksuit, we can have a lot of fun with it. There'll be, and we want to like, I think eventually, it would be really nice, like to have our customer to be like working with our customers. We'll have a customer fashion brand that produces a tracksuit. We could like co-brand it for the year. That could be like the tracksuit drop for that year. Send it out to clients, partners. So yeah, if anyone wants a monogram tracksuit, you refer us a client, you get a tracksuit.
Okay, so if anyone listens to this podcast and goes and becomes a client of Tracksuit, let me know, because I want my tracksuits.
It could just be a house filled with tracksuits. Like,
I need like a
hundreds.
Markless code. Do you listen to the podcast Markless? Like, / that's what I call marketing. And so
give me my tracksuit right now.
Well, there was a picture of a few of the team and James, I think, in white tracksuits somewhere, and I was just like, oh man, it's just brilliant. It doesn't stop, right? So it's just
yeah. I mean, it's sort of cool until like the first newspaper article that was ever published about me. I showed up at a black tie investor event in a bright purple tracksuit, and the newspaper article called me the Teletubby of the New Zealand startup scene. And I was like, I mean, I knew I wasn't going to be taken seriously, but I didn't know that I was going to go like full Teletubby level. So we'll see.
Oh, that is so cool. I mean, growing this business is like huge. You have a young family. How are you staying sane? Like, what's the balance?
I think, I mean, the things I'm working on, my co-founder sent me a really nice message over the weekend and over the last week, knowing that I'm in New York and I'm going a bit hard on the hours. And like, this comes back to that culture point. Yeah. And he just said, like, hey, next week I'm blocking out time in your calendar. You got to go for a run, 3 runs next week. And like, so we look after each other. It's, it's not easy launching a company and having a young family, but we're trying to look after each other and make sure that we take holidays and yeah, again, do it in the right way, not have too much burnout or crispiness, which we call it when you're like nearing burnout, just a little bit crispy. So I'm working on that balance all the time. I think is ultimately the right way to say, like, I'm I do spend time with my family. I block out, certain parts of the day,
Yeah.
and that's really important to me. And that keeps me inspired. You know, it's an evolution. Every, this
Yeah.
last little bit where we went from 14 to 52 employees, that's been a big 6 months. And like over that time, learning how to change your calendar and like how available you are. And, it's like you have to innovate on the product and business side, but you also have to like innovate on this is how I show up. This is who I am. This is what my calendar looks like side. So,
Yeah.
constant learning, but, I think that you'll make your way through it if people are looking after you, which is important.
That
I
is
think,
great. It's great to have
yeah,
that, right? That you have that
yeah,
someone looking out for you. And I think that point you make about kind of how you change your leadership and dynamic, because like being always available to 14 people is easier than 52. When you get to 150, like you know what I mean. It's just going to have to change. It doesn't mean you care any less. You probably care more because you want to make sure all those people continue to have a job.
yeah. And I think you just always have to like be very strong in making decisions based on the values that you set out at the start. It's like saying no. We have our North Star. We want to be the best brand tracker in the world. Like saying no to a lot of extra product developments and stuff that don't align with that North Star. It's sort of the same with like the company values and personal values. Like you set those out, write them down, and then as challenges come up or as things change, growing staff, new geographies, new time zones, you just have to like look back at those values and say, this is how we make decisions in this company. This is how I make decisions. I'm going to do it in aligned with those values.
I mean, look, thanks so much for your time today. Before you go, I have a very good friend of mine here who lives locally to me, and his name is Connor. And for years, I've suggested to him that we should do a podcast called What Would the Connors Do? And the premise of the podcast is people would come to us with their problems and we'd answer them. Now, he hasn't really committed. So this is your chance to own What Would the Connors Do? You don't have to say yes now, Connor, but like just leaving it with you.
Okay. I'll take that and I'll think about it.
Listen, it's an open offer and we can,
Okay.
create merch from that. We'll come back to it another day. Listen, thank you so much for your time today. I have been fascinated by watching the journey you've been on and the growth. And I think I truly believe what you're doing is so valuable. I sound like I'm overstating that. I actually truly believe it is, because marketers need this. CEOs, CFOs need this information to grow and kind of stop thinking about the short term and think about the long term more and get that balance right. So huge congratulations and just best of luck and all the success in the world for you and everyone at Tracksuit.
Thanks so much, Connor. That means a lot. And yeah, your support, your kind words, really appreciate that. So thanks for having me on. I'm forever grateful and actually just, I'm like fanboying over here. So, it's like, this is really cool. I appreciate it.
Thanks a million.
All right. Cheers, Connor. Bye.
Well, let's see if What Would the Connors Do takes off. I suspect it will. Connor was fantastic to chat to. I love the singular vision and focus that they have. And I don't think I was overstating how important what they're doing is. If you are a new consumer brand in Australia, New Zealand, UK, or the US, and you aren't tracking your brand because you weren't able to afford it, now you can. You can create a shared language and understanding metrics with your leadership. This is game-changing stuff. So that's it for this episode. Thanks so much for listening to That's What I Call Marketing. If you need help to grow your business through marketing, get in touch and see how we can help through a range of services on that'swhaticallmarketing.com. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you are listening to get notified of when our next episode lands. And you can also find all previous episodes on that'swhaticallmarketing.com. Follow us on Instagram on that'swhaticallmarketing, on Twitter or X, @that's_marketing. And you can watch all our episodes back on YouTube. Yes, you guessed it. That's What I Call Marketing. Thanks again to the Indie List for their support of this show. If you need experienced, excellent marketing talent, go to theindielist.ie. Don't go anywhere else. theindielist.ie.